In T-minus 3, 2, 1, we begin the fun. Touring our way through the NBA from that big apple to the place by the bay. Is your mind buckled in? Because it's time to begin. Sekou and his friends are doing it again. The Hang Time Podcast is the spot, so sit back, relax, because the show's about to drop.
Welcome to the Hang Time Podcast. I'm your host, Sekou Smith, here in Atlanta. Got a special show lined up for you, as always, here on the Hang Time Podcast. Joining us today, a timely topic if ever there was one, taking to the top. It's the Philadelphia 76ers and the most audacious process in the history of professional sports. The author, Yaron Weitzman, award-winning NBA writer, Bleacher Report contributor, has penned, to me, one of the best palace intrigue books we've had in recent memory about an NBA team and just how they were trying to navigate themselves from a lottery rebound team on a regular basis into a championship contender. As you well know, the process has not gone according to a solid, steady plan in Philadelphia. But Yaron Weitzman gives us a really good in-depth inside look behind the curtain at the process in Philadelphia. And he joins us right now on the Hang Time Podcast. It's not often that I find myself this frustrated after reading a fantastic book. And Take It to the Top is by far one of the best books I've read here recently. It's the story of the Philadelphia 76ers and what is titled as the most audacious process in the history of professional sports. Yaron Weitzman is the author, NBA writer from Bleacher Report. And listen, I'm serious. I got done reading this and I had to write down like who all I was upset with, like how many different people are now on my list. It's fascinating to me, the story itself, just doing something this wild. But when you're writing this, are you going through those same emotions, trying to sort out who's the hero, who's the villain, and how to separate all these different people who are involved?
Yeah, I mean, from the way, yes, and or for my biggest experience was, which I think it's similar. It came out in different ways. Like I would go to my wife, not another thing. I can't have any more things, right? Like the Jimmy Butler trick. Like just no more, right? That's kind of which is like there's so much, right? Or like Jimmy Butler or Markel or just whatever things you forget about. Yeah, it's kind of like we were joking, right? Because before you asked me, who's this? And I said the answer is yes. Who's the villain, whatever? And I said the answer is yes, right? But like, it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of what I'm proud of and what I enjoyed most about the book is I feel like it is a good glimpse of how things work in the NBA, just like, power, players and coaches, relationships and all that. And I found the process for me doing this just illuminating in terms of, so this is, I don't know if I curse, but this is how bleep really happens. This is how stuff really gets done in this league. And these are how decisions are made. So, yeah, so it's surprising. And then I guess maybe not surprising. I don't know. You have powerful, rich people with egos and talented. And this is just what happens when you throw them all into one ecosystem.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And this is I can't think of a more opportune time to have this book come out, too, when you look at the current state of the Sixers. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, the process himself, are on the shelf. The Sixers are kind of a mess right now, trying to figure out who and what they are. Brett Brown is in the crosshairs, of course. Elton Brand is at the center of whatever they're trying to get done. But, Yaron, then I went back and I started charting. I was like, all right, let me think. The core group of players that they had that could have been the nucleus of this team. And this is just
I'm really curious to hear. I want to hear your list. Okay.
Yeah. So they went through Michael Carter-Williams, who was a Rookie of the Year, Nerlens Noel, Markelle Fultz, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and then Dario Saric. I was thinking, like, if you could snatch a fantasy young core group of players out of thin air, what would that look like for the Sixers? And I came up with those names. That's just the start. And I thought, that's not to mention Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, Landry Shamet, or some of these other guys who actually have passed through the locker room in Philly. Do you think there was ever a chance that they get this right when you take such a bold step in trying to tank. There's no other word for it. When you're trying to tank, did you have to sacrifice some of these players that maybe could have been good fits there, but for the sake of the greater good of what you're trying to get done, you had to burn through some of these players?
So it's funny because so you read the book, right? So you'll know, the book is far from an apology for Sam Hinkie. It's not a book. It's not I'm not positioning him as Billy Beane in Moneyball, right? I mean, I give him some. It's complimentary parts, but also it's far from an apology. But I do. All that being said, I do think that. Man, it would have been interesting to see if he would have been allowed to stick it through a little more, because then I think the roster looks closer to what you just outlined, right? They're not pulling the trigger on a lot of these trades until they're ready, right? Or until maybe later on. Somebody else asked me recently, what do you think the roster would look like right now? And how would they have made the Al Horford move or whatever? And I was saying, I have no idea. It's like a sliding doors thing. What would Sam Hinkie do if he came in last year? If he was kind of brought back, what would he have done? I don't know. It's interesting, right? Looking back, and I don't think I mentioned, I don't know if I focused a ton on this in the book, but just as I've been thinking about this stuff more, I think that Boston series, the first year they lost to Boston in the playoffs, I think that, looking back, is a fascinating inflection point for where they kind of felt like they needed to make some big-time decisions. The roster wasn't good enough. They had to go quicker, faster. Saric they don't believe in him. They don't believe in Covington, all these things. Looking back, I think that in 5-10 years, you might look back at that series as one of those crossroads where it pushed them in a different direction. And to be honest, it looks like not a great one right now.
Yeah, it's just, it's such a fascinating topic. We rarely examine stuff like this so close to it happening. Normally people take a stretch of years to give it time and let it breathe and look back at it. But I think it's awesome that you did it now, because to me, you lose some of this intrigue 10 years from now. You know what I mean? Stuff about Brian Colangelo is just mind-boggling. I don't know if he was trying to, sabotage whatever Hinkie had done, or if he was trying to, jumpstart his I don't even get what his motives might have been. And do you glean anything from all the people you talked to? And I know you interviewed close to 200 people for this book. Do you get a sense of what his motivations were when he went in there and did the things he did?
So a couple of talking to people and then digging up old clips of when he was hired in Phoenix and him talk back 1990s, whatever it was, right? When he was 29 and Jerry hires him, and him kind of talking about there's these old quotes from him where him talking about, I'm aware of the nepotism charge, it bothers me, or him going to work in real estate for a year, outside after Phoenix to try to. Going through that stuff and then having someone tell me that, which we can laugh about it a little bit, right? That he always thought he got railroaded for the Andrea Bargnani selection. He thought that was a good pick, right? And he thought Toronto, he was scapegoated. I think, right, exactly. But I think this is somebody it does, and then we learned it from Burnergate, right? He's somebody who cares what people think. I really think that, and I think he's somebody whose whole life has been trying to prove himself, be it I'm more than just Jerry's kid, be it I'm good at this basketball thing, and then you drop him in, and we probably couldn't have known this before, but dropping him in Philadelphia in that situation and having him, making him he's going to be a villain to many Sixers fans who love Hinkie, and he's going to have to prove himself to him. And that's the worst situation for a guy like that, a guy who's a little insecure and cares what other people think and wants to prove that, no, he actually belongs and he's good at this. And I really do think that played a role in taking a gamble on Markelle Fultz. I really do, in terms of, I'm going to show that I'm good. I'm going to put my imprint on this franchise. And this is going to be, it won't just be me guiding Sam's ship. It's no, Brian did this. Brian Colangelo did this. I'm more than just Jerry's kid. And I think that's almost how I would explain him.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. I like Brian Colangelo. I've worked with him before on set on NBA TV. He's a nice guy. He's a smart guy. He comes from great stock. I have the utmost respect for Jerry Colangelo. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what it is about, you can't prepare people for the pressures that come with being a general manager, which makes Sam Hinkie's persona in this so hilarious to me. Because he clearly had an idea of what he wanted to do, and somehow or another, the fans in Philadelphia bought in, which is stunning to me. Still to this day remains the most mind-boggling part about this entire thing. I was getting, tweets from Sixers fans telling me how stupid I was for not understanding what they were doing. I've never seen a fan base embrace losing the way the Sixers fans did, all in the name of the process. Like they were fully on board with this, which for a city that fancies itself the toughest for fans anywhere, that just I don't even understand how this happened. Like, how could this possibly take hold in a city like Philly?
It's funny because, right, in a way, it's like, say, even if you're not a fan of tanking, right? Like the idea, I joke, it's a half joke, right? In the NBA, if you have a plan and you stick to it and you're consistent with it, you're already ahead of the curve, right? It doesn't matter what the plan is, just whatever it is. Like, if you stick to the plan, and they had a plan and they had the opportunity, like, they kind of blew it, or I'll say the franchise, So even if you don't necessarily, and I know, there are plenty of good reasons why Hinkie was, we'll say, pushed out / kindly shown the door / whatever, however you want to diplomatically phrase it. They had right, getting fans to buy into a rebuild was the hardest thing, and it's interesting, like, why did it happen? I kind of start the book with the Iverson trade and like how if you go back, they trade Iverson, they don't tank, they get Andre Miller, they win a bunch of games, they end up kind of being mediocre for 10, whatever the amount of years, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Yes, purgatory, as you
purgatory, right? Exactly.
No question.
And the fans will get bored, and like it's funny. And then you have all these different wins going. I focus in the book on these two podcast hosts, Spike Eskin and Mike Levine, who host this podcast called the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. It's hilarious, but like they ended up galvanizing a fan base, and like it allowed this pro-process Hinkie supporting group to have an organized voice. And that just it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. And more people latch on. They're organized and they're loud, and like it's almost like it's a bad comparison, but it's it's like the union thing, right? If you put a bunch of people together and you have them have one representative, it kind of gives them more power. And this became that. And I don't think the Sixers organization was aware of how much damage would be done by Hinkie being shown the door.
Right. There was definitely a fervent movement behind Hinkie and his methods, which is interesting to me. I listened to Daryl Morey the other day. I think he was on with Zach Lowe from Sloan, and he was talking about the Rockets. He was looking back at the Rockets, some of their missteps, and it struck me. He was talking about the fact that, we lost, but when they lost to the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, they had that brutal stretch where they missed 27 straight threes, whatever it was.
Yeah. And
he rationalized it, and it reminded me of why I'm so frustrated with the analytics community, because they're gonna, in a world where we deal in bottom line everything, you win or you lose, you're up or you're down, and then you get into these analytics discussions, and there's all this gray area that's allowed, and I think that's the one part of it that's never really connected for a lot of fans, is that you can't, it's such a hypocritical thing to be as married to the process or even the analytics of the NBA in this day and age, and not look at the bottom line. The fact that you either won or you lost. Your team succeeded or you failed. Like we don't have that connection between the gray area and then what we all see is just the plain common sense bottom line. And Hinkie, to me, falls somewhere in the middle there. Like he's celebrated on one side, vilified on the other, and there's no real consensus connection about what he did. Like to this day, I don't know do you give him credit? Do you blame him? I don't know what kind of responsibility he bears for this whole thing.
No, it's fascinating, right? Like I kind of joke, like the book should be called Context / Gray Area, right? Because it's just everything is like, you can think this, but also this, and then what happens is each side, digs in more on their part, and it's kind of like politics like that, right, in a way. But
Yes.
yeah, like you're saying right now, the more like I hear you're saying, right. So you can decry, you can say small sample size always, but in the end, like a playoff series is a small sample size, right, and you have to win, right. And so it's like it's a funny thing, like the Hinkie thing. It's so yeah, like to get credit, they got Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, right? If you're going oversimplification, that's great. But where I come with you, and I'm probably a little more, I'll say maybe a little more analytically a little more favorable to analytics than what you're saying. But the draft is a great example, right? Hinkie's whole thing was the draft. We need as many picks as we can, lottery picks, because the draft is a crapshoot, and therefore I know I'm going to miss. And he was admitting that and basically saying, but I want more swings at the plate. Which I get, but it's also like, no, you also have your jobs to hit. Like, yeah, no one's saying you have to go 10 for 10, but like you can't miss on 3-4 lottery picks. That's the job to say. Well, but I'm admitting that like the job's fluky. Like, no, none of us can do that in the world. That's not how this works. So stuff like that is like, I agree with you. It's a funny gray area. It's a strange thing. It's a strange thing to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like what made you think, you know what? I gotta take this chance and write this book now. Like, what made you dive in on this topic?
Yeah, that's a good way. So I live in New York, so I needed around then and still now sometimes like the Knicks and Nets, not much to write about. So I was kind of spending more time in Philly, right, writing a little about them. Yeah, honestly, like I wish I had it was more. I wish I had more of a calling in. I mean, I was fascinated by the process and I thought it interesting, but I also wanted to write a book, and I thought this would be a good topic, and I was interested in the idea of kind of the politics of the NBA. So I joke, I said at the beginning, this is not Moneyball 2.0. Part of me did think at first, like the book would be about how, Sam Hinkie, this brilliant guy, changed the NBA or whatever, and that was not what the book turned out to be, and I'm grateful and happy that it's not that. But I was a little naive going in. Maybe that's how to explain it.
Sure, I know, and I appreciate the sentiment of going in with one idea and then reporting
right
and writing something else, because that's how this works. Like, I think we all that cover the league have our own mind about something, and then once we dig a little deeper, we find out it's something different. Like, I can imagine you went into this thinking, okay, this is a basketball story and a great story about the changing way that you would build a team in the NBA, and you come out of it with a classic story of palace intrigue and backstabbing and sabotage, and, like all of these things that maybe you didn't have in mind going in. So let me ask you about a couple different people. What you think of it and of them now at this stage. Brett Brown.
Sure.
I'm surprised he survived to this point, Yaron. I really am, because normally a team gets rid of the coach sooner rather than later because he's the most expendable guy normally.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw Kenny Atkinson, right? That's a great example, right? Like that is Kenny Atkinson is Brett Brown, right? Like that's the guy.
Yes, great example.
He didn't make it. I think I do like. Brett probably benefited from all the other people around him. That's like, okay, well, we got to keep this guy. We got to keep something stable, like with everything else going on. He benefited from that. I mean, it's like, what was it, 2 years ago? He was promoted to interim president of basketball. And Brian, when the Burnergate happened. My thoughts on Brett Brown. Brett Brown, again, gray, right? He's been through a lot. He's been through, if you rattle off what things that a head coach has to deal with. I don't know. Brett's gold, silver, and bronze medal, right? It's not even comparison. It's insane. And the way the Sixers media policy often is, it's often him being left to explain, be the PR guy, which is not, he's a basketball coach. I do think, that being said, Brett has gotten a bit of a pass in terms of he's a little sharper than people realize, behind the scenes. I got some stories in the book about him yelling or cursing at people, things like that, which again, I think that's probably common among coaches, but Brett Brown's really good at he's really good in front of the media usually, and he gives you long answers, and he's friendly, and he's articulate and interested and helpful. But there's a different side to him. Yeah. I mean, it's coming out of, we're recording this. I was just reading quotes from Jimmy Butler on JJ Redick's podcast about Brett Brown, which would maybe be a different extreme. But yeah, so again, there's a gray area there with Brett Brown, right? And it does seem like he's in trouble in terms of will he be there long term?
Yeah, it does. It seems like that's the next thing to drop. Number 2 on my list. And like I said, I got five specific things I was thinking about as I'm reading the book. Number 2 is Joel Embiid. What do you make of Embiid at this point? I still love the talent, and I'm intrigued by the talent, but I'm completely frustrated with the follow through. I just don't feel like he follows through at all on his own promise to himself to be the best player he can be.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Like I'm going to come off as critical, but I guess like with a lot of the guys you're going to ask me about probably, because I feel like, like I do feel like I did a little myth busting, right, on some of this stuff. And like, Embiid's one of those guys, right? The example I give, and as a basketball fan, forget even as like a writer of this book, as a basketball fan, I'm so disappointed that, they lose the way they did Toronto last year, literally by inches, right? And Embiid, his body's breaking down the entire series. He's sick. He's got the knee issue. Like literally the Sixers lose because the minute Embiid is off the floor, they can't, they hemorrhage points, right? And if there's ever, and he's crying after, he's emotional. And like, if there's ever a moment where a guy would say, you know what? I saw how close I am. Like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds and get in the best shape I can now. Like, that would be it. And that he didn't do that. It just like, it almost reinforced. And I end the book kind of on an uplifting note about him that he had learned. And obviously, it doesn't look good, right? In hindsight, like I was too forgiving. Right? And it's like, and you hear the eating stories and like the stupid Chick-fil-A thing where like he has Landry Shamet or rookies get him like 4 sandwiches, 4 fries, and 4 shakes from Chick-fil-A. And then he's claiming, on podcasts that like that part's made up. And like, I've had representatives tell me that's not true. It wasn't him eating it. I mean, I don't really get how that makes sense. Like, I don't know what the prank is about having the guy pick up the order, but then not having you eat. Like, I guess I'm missing something there. Right. So it's like, yeah, like I'm not saying like, listen, I agree. The follow through, you phrased it perfectly. Like it's just, and who am I to say, his life's pretty good, right? So it depends what you want. But as a bad, so who am I to say, change what you're doing? But if you're thinking from a basketball standpoint, yeah, he hasn't displayed that he's willing to put in the work to be great or to be the sort of leader to be great, And
he's ridiculously talented. I mean, that's the thing. He's beyond talented. That is not up for debate. And that goes for number 3 on my list as well, Ben Simmons, who for some reason I find myself defending Simmons more than anybody involved. Like I feel like Simmons is more maligned than anyone. And I think a lot of it is based on, I watched it, the Showtime series he did before he got to the league when he was at LSU. Yeah. And his whole family was involved. And that colored my opinion of Ben Simmons probably more than it should have. I felt like, wow, this guy got taken advantage of or didn't take advantage of the situation he was in at LSU. I mean, how he couldn't have made the tournament with that team, the NCAA tournament, was unbelievable to me. I'm thinking, how in the world could a player this good not lead a team to the NCAA tournament? That just didn't make sense. So then I'm thinking about, okay, so he gets dropped into this process with the Sixers where he's kind of the secondary piece automatically because, I didn't feel like he went to a clean slate where he gets to come in and establishes himself as the tentpole rookie. And maybe I'm being too nice to Ben Simmons. Maybe I'm being too forgiving.
No, it's like, and again, talking about, right, so I write the book a year, like I finished writing it a year ago, right, coming out now or whatever, like this season would sort of back up a lot of your set, like he plays hard, right, and he seems to work and he's gotten better. But again, like it's, when you kind of ask me, not villains, but just like there's something, I'll say weird or hanging over every person in the story, and like the jump shooting thing is crazy. It's crazy. The
nuts.
Fact that, what did you say?
It's nuts. I know guys who are horrible shooters that shoot all the time. So I'm saying I don't get
right. I agree. Like people don't make the Rondo comparison, and I'm always like, no, you can't compare Rondo because Rondo would shoot. Rondo wasn't a great shooter, but like he would shoot when he's open, and it ended up being his shooting numbers were pretty good because he would take open jumpers, right? Like it's not. We've literally. I don't know if in NBA history, like there really might not. Like we've literally never seen somebody like this who will literally not shoot the ball, right? And the work, like, first of all, 2 parts on it. One, he can shoot a little bit. He's not great, but like you watch pregame, he can hit a corner 3 there, here and there. But then, like, you know, in the book I have stories like he's working with a shooting coach, and then they come back and they decide, no, his half brother is gonna. They come back in the summer, and no, his half brother is going to be a shooting coach, like, which is just crazy. And that kind of goes back to Brett Brown, where Brett Brown's saying yes, and I guess there's a whole different discussion on player empowerment and who runs the franchise and things like that. But like, in what world does a guy like Ben Simmons have his half brother, who's like maybe a low level D1 assistant at that point, like be a shooting coach? That's unheard of. So yeah, it's just fascinating. And I mean, we saw it this year, right? Like with Brett's press conference comment when he goes, "Tell his brother and his agent I want to see a 3 every game," and Ben hasn't taken one since, which kind of tells you all you need to know about who's in charge there, right? Like it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. I don't even know. Like I don't know. What was the question? I don't remember. I can go on. Ben Simmons, like the shooting thing. It's the strangest thing. It's the strangest thing.
Exactly. It's just the subterfuge involved in this whole thing. To me, is unbelievably, interesting for people who care about the league. And it's like, you don't have to be a Sixers fan to care about this. I don't think it's just about the Sixers anymore. Number 4 on my list is Markelle Fultz, who I find myself giving a complete pass to now, as opposed to the arrows I was shooting at him when he was with the Sixers. I was convinced. I was like, this dude should have never been the number 1 pick. He's nowhere near as talented. The scouts got bamboozled and this and that. And then I watch him now in Orlando, and I'm like, okay, I see the talent. I see why people were so excited about him. And I almost feel like he got done wrong. Like they shipped him out of there before he got a chance to redeem himself in Philly.
But you know what's weird? So when you watch him, though, but I agree with you, except – well, no, I agree that it shows the talent, but he's also still not shooting, right? And he still can't shoot. Yeah. And it's like, it almost makes the story more strange. And I know, Markelle, he's positioned this as like he had a shoulder injury and he's recovered from it and all that, but man, he still doesn't shoot and he still can't shoot. Like, if you watch him warm ups, it doesn't look like his old shot. And coming out of college, he could shoot. And it's funny, excuse me. Like what you're saying is true. Like you're seeing, right? You're seeing the talent, like the big guards getting the lane at will, and the spin moves, and the strong finishes, and like the sense to dump it off. Like you can see, where it's almost you can see the guy Brian Colangelo thought he was trading for, right? And like how that guy would be a perfect fit if he could shoot next to Simmons and Embiid. I mean the Fultz story is like messy, and like I have stuff in the book about how his relationship with his mom, his best friend, and his coach, and like one scene where he's crying, saying, "You should have left me in college. The money's doing this," and you never know. I know, like the Fultz and his camp push back on any idea, any notion that this is more than just a shoulder injury. They refuse to admit it, and maybe they're right. I don't know, but it's a messy situation. Like the context I would give is. Markelle Fultz, when he was a sophomore, he was playing JV basketball. He's not like I compare him to Ben Simmons, who was groomed to be a number 1 pick basically from the age of like 12, right? Markelle Fultz was not that. Stardom was a new thing for him and his family, and stardom could be hard for a lot of people to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think about other players around the league now who weren't, McDonald's All-Americans in training since they were 10 years old. Giannis was nowhere on anybody's radar. There have been some fantastic stories. Pascal Siakam. Another one where they take the same elements that Fultz is dealing with and have used them to fuel all-star bids and, and championships and MVPs. And for whatever reason, Fultz, to me, it's like a burden for him that he was the number 1 pick. Like
it does look like it, right? You can almost see it on him, yes.
It's just, it's like I said, it makes this entire story even more crazy. And the last group on my list, and I had to group them all together because I don't think you could single one of them out. And it's Philly ownership in their front office. I mean, I don't know what to make of how they even feel about where they are right now, and what they think is the best path to whatever end they're seeking. I mean, obviously they want to be a championship team, but who makes the calls and who's got the most influence? You know as well as I do, there are a lot of instances where an owner might not be as vocal publicly, but might be doing so much behind the scenes that he's the one, or he or she or that group is the one that's doing all the directing of traffic unbeknownst to the public. I don't know if I can get a good handle on what's going on in Philly. And I met Scott O'Neil years ago, and I really liked him. I mean, they have some bright, interesting people, some that have been good to the press and to you. I could tell in this book. I don't know how much cooperation did you get from the Sixers at all, if anything, in terms of going about this topic.
The answer, what's less than zero, right? Zero plus defense on other people I was trying to call. So yeah, that's I can promise the book does not involve favors to people on background. You know, I'm talking on background. That I can promise. No, it's fun. Like I told a story, like they would say no, they would call former employees to remind them of the NDAs they had in their contracts or their buyouts. One player I set up a conversation with. I go to him doing the book. He said, I'll give you an hour whenever you need. I go back to a month later. He goes, yeah, I was told I can't do any book interviews. Sorry. But you're asking me, the front office, it's like funny, right? So somebody asked me yesterday if I could have anything on Truth Serum. Like if I could put them on Truth Serum, what would be the question I want answered? And that's the answer now is like, who's running basketball things? And they would say Elton. They would push back and say Elton. But then I think they would also say, but with input from ownership and this and that, and then like you get back in a circle where it comes like, okay, but then so let's go back to our question, right? Who's making the basketball decisions? I think I really do think, and it's more than I'll call it an educated thinking. I don't know, that's not good English, but ownership and Josh Harris are the ones pushing for a lot of the things. That's my read on the situation.
Yeah, because I feel like, and maybe this is a misinterpretation on my part, but I feel like their ownership group, like a lot of new ownership, contingents in this league, they come in with this idea that, hey, we're going to apply all of our successful practices that we've used to get here to the league, and that'll work because we're so smart and we're so sharp. And we've got this fresh idea about how to do it. And I say to myself, as a person who's been around this league for nearly 2 decades and watched every possible iteration of how to reinvent the league go up in flames. Like I've watched every time somebody comes in thinking they got it figured out with this new approach or this fresh approach, and they get burned. I mean, I watched Mark Cuban beat his head against the wall for years thinking all the things he would do differently that would lead to a championship, not do it. And then finally, when he got a team that was seasoned enough, mean enough, with a superstar player in the sweet spot, they won a championship. Like, he could try all these different things, but he won it just like every other team's won it, with a little bit of luck, some really good planning, and the right players at the right times. Like, it doesn't change.
No, I agree. Like bringing, if you want to say, we do critical thinking in my field, or we can bring that, like, God bless. Even analytical thinking, God bless. But no, I agree. I think these guys, the NBA is just a different beast, a different animal. It's not like any other business for a host of reasons. Like, mix up. One example I give is you have competitors. You're competing with different teams, but you're also partners with them. Like, just the whole setup is different. Like, it's just everything. You can't compare. Or Josh Harris himself said it's funny, like at Sloan, I think it was last year. And I love this quote. He goes, I don't have the exact, but, we own this $2 billion chemical company that nobody cares about. And this company is known as like one of the, in private equity, like one of the legendary private equity transactions that they ever did. Because we have this company no one cares about, but everybody has an opinion about the Sixers starting lineup. And like that stuff, right? And that stuff, and these guys care what people think, and they hear that stuff. They can pretend they don't, but they do. Like they do hear and they do care, and they do pay attention, and that influences them and affects them. And it's just a saying, I agree, it doesn't work. And like, it's interesting. So when Josh Harris buys the team in 2011, 2012, he refers to it as a really good business opportunity. That's what he says. Now, to hear him talk about it, he talks almost as if like he's like on the dais when they're introducing Josh Harris, when they're introducing Tobias Harris and Al Horford last year. He's like introducing them and explaining why the starting five works schematically, right? It's like you get these guys buy into it. It makes you different. You're involved in an NBA team. You're not just another rich guy. And I think he likes being a GM. But I agree with you, right? There was definitely a thinking that, we're going to bring our thoughts, to this organization. And to be fair to them and complimentary, like from a business standpoint, they've pretty much done that. Like I think they bought it for $250 million, and I think the last Forbes ranking was $2 billion, right? Like they've done a lot of interesting, innovative things from a business standpoint. But when it comes to building a winning team, it's just it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, the basketball part always hits a snag. I don't care who it is.
Yep.
You know, I don't care what organization it is, that at some point or another they realize, oh, you know, what we thought is not what it is, and somebody with a basketball mindset and with an understanding of how this works has to be involved in that process. So this is one of my favorite. Literally wrestling with myself. I'd read, 40 pages, close it, walk around, yelling, pissed about something, because it brought up memories of things that I thought, like, I'll never understand the Dario Saric thing, and I won't even drag you into that. For years, John Schumann and I were debating whether or not Dario Saric would be able to come over and be a key piece for the Sixers.
So funny.
And we heard so much hype about him, like so much. There was all of this, if you talk to scouts and people who are well-versed in the European game, they were telling you, like, man, Saric is going to be great in the league. He's going to be the ideal glue player, blah, blah, blah. And then he comes over, does exactly what people say he's going to do, and they run him out of town. They toss him aside like nothing. And I'm like, what the world? That's the frustrating part about what they've done in Philly to me that really makes Take It to the Top a must-read. I mean, you got to read this if you care at all about the league and have paid attention to it at all. So, great stuff from you, Yaron. Seriously,
I
really
appreciate that.
Book,
no, thank you. I appreciate all the kind words. And I agree. Good stuff. No, I agree. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, good stuff for us. But look, and all you got to do is now just think, in about 5 more years, you come back with part 2, because there'll be another book's worth of crap that goes on between now and the next 5 seasons. There's no question about that.
I have no doubt the Sixers never let us down in terms of narrative and drama. That is true. That is for sure.
No question, man. Listen, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekou.
Once again, we need to thank Yaron Weitzman for coming on the Hang Time podcast this week, talking about his fantastic book, A Page Turn, Taken to the Top, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the most audacious process in the history of professional sports. You must read this book. Got to get your hands on it and check it out. Whole lot of everything going on, as always, in the basketball world, whether there are games on or not. And we'll be here to bring it to you as best we can. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you right here next week on the Hang Time podcast.
This one is done, but in case you want another one, here's the links to all the fun from Sekou Smith's Hang Time run. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, NBA.com/hangtime, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, Hoops fans.